In part 2 of this crash course, we are going to demonstrate the difference between the server-side rendering and the normal rendering. So if you look at this, if we refresh the page, you can see these to-dos will display immediately. If there is no server-side rendering, and if we refresh the page, you can see it takes some time to load these two to-dos. And we can also see this time each people has different to-dos, so they will not see all the same to-dos together. For example, if we type another to-do at this side, and then we add a new to-do, and just Cyrus can see his own to-dos, but Luna will not see Cyrus' to-dos. And these are the main parts that we want to teach in this second part. In this part, we are going to add the detail page, and so the user click on this and will go to the details and see the to-do details. And so we are going to use the NextJS dynamic route. And so first we go to the pages and create a new folder called to-dos. And then under this folder, we create another file called id.js. So later, our URL can make use of the to-dos and then add some IDs and go to that detail page. So we back to the id.js and create the components. And then we change this to details. And now we are going to use the material UI grid. So we replace this with the grid. And we have to import the grid from the material UI, and then we close the grid, and then we type detail, this word, and then we go back to the to-do items because we want to make the items that when user click on this button will go to the detail page. So we back to the to-do items and we find the more vertical icons, and then we go to create another functions called cmore is equal to id event, and then again we have to stop the propagations. If we do not have the stop propagations, we will click on the vertical button and then it will trigger these functions, and this is not what we want, so we have to add the event.stop propagations, and then we have to import the use route because we have to go to another page. So we have to import the use router from next and then router, and then we have to create a router constant router is equal to use router, and then we back to the functions and then we type router dot push, and then we use the to-do because our folder name is to-dos, and then we pass this ID to this route, so we use the template literal. So after we create this function, we are going to bind this to another icon, so we paste on this and then we change this to see more. So we can back to the page and we try to click on the button, and now if we click on this, we can see the details. We just see this word because we haven't passed any other information to this page. Now instead of just displaying the details inside our detail page, we are going to get the details from the document. So at the bottom of the id.js, we are going to use the get static path and get static props. So first we have to add the get static path. So for the get static path, it will get all the to-dos in the collections of to-dos and then map all the IDs to the path, and then we set the fallback to be false. So it will prevent all other pages. And next, we will use the get static props, and these get static props will be executed when the page is loaded, and it will get the IDs from the context. And so after we have the ID, we will get that document, that specific document from the to-dos collections. So after we have the documents, we are going to stringify the data from the snapshot and then pump into the components. So in order to get this in the components, we are going to the top and then we pass the to-do props. We are going to pass the stringified JSON. So we use constant to-dos is equal to JSON.parse, and then we pass the to-do props here. And then after that, we are going to display the details. For example, we can type to-do.title, and then we have the to-do.detail. And now we can see we have this error because we haven't imported the get docs. So we go to import the get docs from the firestore. So we go to here and copy this and then import from the Firebase firestore. And I think it should be ready to go. So, and we save it. And we also have to import the get docs. And I think we should also import the dot. We have to import the collections. So we go to here and paste the collections. And then we also have to import the DB from the Firebase config. So we save it and then we click on Some to Do. Now we can see the title and also the details is displayed inside this page. Now instead of just displaying the value like this, we are going to use a CRUD to display the title and also the details. And also we will add a button to back to the home page. And now we are going to add the grid item. And the grid item will wrap the card and also the card content. And the item XS is equal to 3 is according to the documentation. This is the length. So this is the 3 units of length for this grid items. And then we will also add the box shadows for the card, and also it will have a light gray color, and we have the min width of 275. So we are going to add the content, and the content has the to-do title and also the detail. And then we have the margin bottoms of 1.5 unit. So it will not be too close to the button, and it has the secondary color, and which is a gray colors. And then this is a link back to the home page. So now we are going to import the component. So we have the grid, and we are going to add the card, and also has the card content, the typography, and card actions. And the link is from the next.js, so we are going to import the link from next link. And then we also have to import the button. So we save it, and then we back to the page and see whether it's changed. Now we have this card, and we have the title, the detail, and also we can back to home. And now if we go to another to do, so it's Apple, and we also have this card to display the detail and also the title. And maybe we can also add a max width. So we add a max width of 500 units. And so now this is much better. We are going to add the loading page. So we go to use this React loading package. So we have to back to the project and stop the server. And then we type yarn add React. And at the same time, we go to the component and create a new file called loading.js. And then we type underscore RAFCE. And then we put the loading package, the React loadings, into the grid, and just like the previous page. And of course, we have to import the React loading from React loading. And then we have to import the grid from the material UI. And we also make this style with minimum height of 100 viewport height. And then we are going to let the user let us pass the type and color later. So we have to add the type and color at the props. So we already create this loading component, so we can back to the index page, and instead of return the app, we are going to return the loading, and we are going to import the loading from the component. So we go to the top and import the loading from component loading, and now we are going to pass the type and also the color. And if you look at the documentation, we can have different type, and now we choose bubbles, so we pass the type is equal to bubbles, and the color is equal to yellow green. After we save it, we type yarn dev, and then we go to here and switch back to localhost 3000. And now we can see this loading page, and we will use this loading page later. In the previous part, we already created this loading page, and now we are going to create a sign-in page, and they are very similar, so we can just copy and paste it, and then we rename this as login, and then we change the name as login, and then we delete the React loading part because we do not need this loading part. Instead, we are going to use the button. So inside this, we create a button component from the material UI, and then we type sign in Google, and then we use the variant is equal to contain, and then the start icon is equal to Google icon, and so we have to import the Google icon. So we back to the material UI documentations, and we can search inside this material icons page, and then we click on this and copy the import and paste on the top, and then we paste this Google icon into the start icon and save it. And now we can see what happened by going back to the index.js, and we are going to return the Google, that should be the login component, and we import it from the components. And now we back to the page, and now we can see these login buttons. In this part, we are going to create an auth provider, so later all the components can note whether the user is logged in or not. So under the root folder, we create a file called auth.js, and then we are going to create the auth context, and then we have to import the create context from React, and maybe we type the RAFC first. So we copy the create context from React, and we also have to use the use effect, so we also import at this time. And then we have to use export constant, and then we change this to auth provider, and we delete this one. And then we have to pass the children so it can wrap the component. And then here we use the use effect, and then we set constant auth is equal to get auth, and then we import the get auth from the Firebase auth. So we import the get auth from Firebase auth, and then we going to return the auth.on token ID token change, and we are going to check the user if this is or not. So we use async user, and then if no user, we will console log no user, and then return, and then otherwise we will type constant token is equal to await user dot get ID token, and then we will try to log the token and also the user. So we type token, and then we going to duplicate this and we change this to user. And then after the use event, we type return and then auth provider, auth context dot provider, and then the value is equal to empty. But later we will pass the current user information at this place, so we leave these values here, and then we pass the children. So all the components will be placed inside the children. And at last, we are going to export another thing, which is use of. And we import the use context from React. So we already create an auth provider, so we can back to the underscore app.js. So we go back to underscore app.js. And instead of just return the components, we are going to use the auth provider to wrap the components, so all the components will know the user information. So we import the auth provider from the auth.js. So we save it. Now we go to the developer console. And then it already refreshed, and you can see there is no user at the console, so which means it already can check whether it has user or not. Already create the sign in Google button before, and now we are going to add these functions. So in order to add the login with Google, we have to go back to the firebase.js, and which is the config file, and then we are going to get the get auth and also the Google auth providers from the Firebase auth. And then under the db.getFirestore, we are going to create another constant called auth, and which is equal to get auth. And then we also create another provider is equal to new and then Google auth provider. And then we export these three constants, db, auth, and also provider. And remember that we have to create these two constants after the initialize app, otherwise you will get an error. For example, if we paste this on top of these two, and then we back to our app, and now you will see no Firebase app has been created. So you must put these two after the initialize app in order to remove the error. So we already create all these three constants, so we can back to our login component and add the functions. So we go to the login and we create a functions called login with Google's, and we have to import the auth from the Firebase config file and also the provider. And then we also have to add the Google the sign in with pop-up from the Firebase auth. So we already create the functions, and so we can bind this function to our button. So we go to the button and then type on click is equal to sign in with Google. And now if we press on this, you can see we have the login page, and we can click on the account and it will back to the page. And if you look at the console, and you can see we have the token and also the user info, including the name and also the email. And because inside our auth provider that we created in the previous part, we had said if there is user, we will display the token and also the user information. In the previous part, we already created a sign in with Google page and also the loading page, and we can see the token after login and see the no user message if the user haven't logged in yet. So we want to return a suitable page for different situations. And now we go to the auth.js and create two states. One is the current user and the other is loading. So we type use state and then type current user. and then we set the default value is node, and we have to import the use date from React, and then we type loading, and the default value is true, and we change this to capital letter, and then we go to no user state, and then we want to set the current user to be null, and then we also want to set the loading to be false because we already confirmed there is no user, so we have to set the loading to be false and set the current user to be null. And then at here we already have the token and user, so we can set the current user, and actually we can copy this and paste to here, but this time we have to set the user. And now we can back to the index and we copy this component, so we cut this, and then we back to the auth.js, and instead of just return the auth provider, we can, if this is loading, then we have to return the loading component, and then if there's no user, then we have to return the login page, so we return login, and we have to import from the component, and else we return the auth context provider. So this only happens when it has the user. So at last, remember, we have to pass the values of the current user. So we type current user. So later we can get the current user by using the use of. And we should change this to if no current user, because the user only applied on this area. So we should use the current user to check if no current user, then it will return the login page. So we want to save all the things, and if we try to back to the underscore app.js to be index.js, and then we returned, we delete this one, and in this part we are going to display the user info, for example the photo and also the name of the user, and then we also add the sign out buttons to sign out this form. So we're back to the index.js, and on top of it we are going to add the user info. So we use the constant and then current user, and then we use of, and the use of is import from the auth file. Now we have the current user, and now we are going down to here, and on top of this we are going to add the avatars and also the username. So on top of the to-do form we paste to here, and then we have to import the box from the material UI, the avatar, and also the typography, and then we save it. Now we can see we have the profile picture and also the name of the user, and then we also want to add the margin top, which has 3 units, so it will not too close to the top. And we are going to add the icon button to wrap the avatar, so later we will add the logout functions on the icon button. And we have to import the icon button, and then at last we have to add the logout buttons on here. So we type on click is equal to auth, and we import from the Firebase config, and then sign out and save it. Now we can click on this to log out, and then we can go to sign in and choose the account, and we can see the profile picture and also the username. At this moment, our web app do not store any information about the email in the to-do. So actually here we will add the to-dos to all people. So no matter you are using this account or the other account, you still see the same to-do list. So in this part, we are going to add the information of the email. So each people will only fetch their own to-do list. In order to do this, we have to back to the to-do form, and then instead of just submit the to-do, we have to add one more information, and which is the current user email. So at this part, we are not just adding the to-do and also the timestamp. We are going to add the current user information. So we have to go to here and get the current user. and which is equal to use of, and the use of is import from the auth provider. So we save it, and at here we have to add the email, and the email is the current user.email. So now if we delete all the to-dos, and then we are going to add Luna's to-do and Luna's detail, and if we go back to the Firestore and then we check, and then you can see we have the email, and which is from Luna. And if we go to another account and then we choose Cyrus, and at this moment you can also see all the people to-dos because we haven't set the query method, but we are going to add another to-do. And now you can see it also has another email. And now we go to fetch the to-do list. So we go to the to-do list, and instead of fetch all the to-dos, we have to make some changes on the query. And here we have to use the current user email. So again, we have to add the current user, and then which is equal to use of. And here we also have to import from the auth.js. And then we go to here, instead of just order by timestamp, we have to add where email is double equal to current user email. And then we have to add the where from the Firestore. Now if we back to the web page and we do not see any to do, and let's check on the console, and you can see it requires the index, so we have to press, and then we press on this link, and then it suggests we have to create an index, so we are going to create. Now after it already finished the creation of index, we can go back to our page and then we refresh. Now instead of seeing all the to-dos, it will just see his own to-dos. And if we go back to the Luna's page, you should just see the Luna to-dos. So let's have a try. And now you can see it just displays Luna's to-do rather than Luna's and Cyrus to-do. At this stage, you can see every time we refresh the page, it takes some time to load the to-dos. So we are going to prepare the server-side render to-do list. But before we going to render the list, we have to get authenticated. This is because if you look at this query, we have to get the current user at the build time. So to do this, we have to get the pirate key from the Firebase. So we go to our website, our Firebase web, and go to the settings. And then we go to the server's account. And then you can see it has a button, generate a new pirate key. So we click on this. And then we change this as secrets.json. And then we paste to our root folder. And next we go to stop the server, and then we add the Firebase admin. And then inside the root folder, we create a file called Firebase admin.js. And then at the file, we go to create a constant. Admin is equal to require Firebase admin. And then we are going to create a service account is equal to require. And then we go to search the secret. and which is this file, the secrets.json, and then we export the function, and which is verify ID token, and which is equal to, and we will pass the token here later, and we will check if there is no app, then we have to initialize the app, and we have the credential, and which is equal to admin.credential.search, and we will pass the server's account, and then we will return the admin.auth.verify ID token, and pass the token .catch and error, and then we will throw the error. And in the next part, we will start building the server-side renders. In this part, we are going to do the server-side renders of the to-do list. So we have to back to the index.js, and then we use the next.js functions, and which is the get server-side props. And now you can see we have the cookies, and in Next.js this is cookies, so we have to import or install the cookies. So we type yarn add cookies, and this is the function that we just created in the Firebase admin, and which is this verify ID token. So we back to the index, and we have to import the verify token from the admin file, so you can see this, and we also have to import the cookies from and we also make a check on the auth.js, and because we haven't set the cookies, set the token into the cookies, so we have to back to here. And then if there is user, we have to set the token to the cookies, otherwise we are going to set the empty string. And since it also hasn't import the cookies, so we have to import the cookies from cookies. Now we back to the index.js, and we already import the cookies and verify token, and there is some spelling mistake at the Firebase admin, and this should be verify, although this name is not a very big problem. And then we back to the index.js, and then we continue to see whether there are any problems, and we do not need the UID. So we get the emails from the token, then we can go to fetch our data, and actually this is very similar to that inside the to-do list, because this is at the client side, but the query is the same. We get the collections where the email is the current user email, and which is the same as the inside the index.js, and which is the same. And after that, we get all the documents, and then we initialize the to-dos, and for each doc we are going to push to this to-do arrays, and we are going to also get the ID, the document ID, and also the timestamp, and we format this like before, so it can be interpreted by the moment.js. So after that, we already has these to-dos, and because there is a timestamp information, and there is a need to stringify the JSON, so we already get the to-do props, so we can pump into our components. So we back to the home, and we paste on this, and then we pass these to-do props to our to-do list. So we already have the to-do props, so we can go to the to-do form. It should be to-do list. So we go to the to-do list and paste this to-do props here, and then we add another use effect, and we are going to say if when the first render it has the to-do props, then we are going to set to be the json.parse, because this is a string, So this will set the to-dos to these to-do props. So we can make a try by typing yarn dev on the terminal, and we can see there are some errors here. So if we continue to check, and we haven't import the collections from Firebase, so we have to import the collections, and we also have to add all the others Firebase functions such as the query and order by and where and get docs, and then we save it. At the website, we can see there is unexpected token U in JSON at position 0, and this is because we forget to import the database from our config file, so actually there is no information for the to-dos props. So if we refresh again, and if you refresh the page, you can see the to-dos pop up immediately without any loadings. So, and we can also enter another to-do, and we just type some random things here. And I think you may also aware the difference. So if you want to look at the difference for no server-side rendering, we can go to the to-do list and hide this use effect, so we do not use these to-do props. And now if you refresh the page, you can see it takes some time to pop up these two to-do. So now we go to uncomment this and save again. Now it's back to server-side render again.